I know Caitlin, of course. We go way back, Midwestern. We had a lot of battles in AAU and stuff like that. We played together.
I feel like she's played in the same manner that she, has since she was, watching her in AAU. Like she's always just been smooth.
We're two competitors who just want to win.
It was meant to be one of those low-noise days, the kind of Team USA camp run that fades from memory almost as soon as it ends. Light film work, controlled scrimmages, no cameras packed along the baseline, no speeches about legacy or chasing gold, just reps, just flow, just another routine session checked off the list. USA basketball was quietly, methodically, moving from one Olympic cycle to the next. But the truth about elite hoops is this: the loudest moments rarely come with whistles or headlines. Sometimes they arrive with a pen sliding across a clipboard in the middle of drills. One name, reportedly, was moved. No announcement followed it. No explanation came with it. No warning at all. Caitlin Clark was penciled into the next controlled run with the starting group. That was the whole change. Ink on paper. Still, according to several people inside that gym, that single, silent adjustment flipped the entire temperature of the room. Not later, not gradually, instantly. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. The energy got tight. Eyes locked onto every step on the floor, like the air itself had suddenly thickened. What followed, based on reports from the camp, was not a loud blow-up or some obvious meltdown. It was something colder and way more unsettling. Phones were allegedly turned off, doors reportedly closed. Coaches stepped away from the floor for what became an emergency meeting that stretched far beyond expectations. When drills finally restarted 3 hours later, the space felt different. Because once a hierarchy shifts, even quietly, there is no pretending it didn't happen. This is not drama for the sake of noise. And it is not about ego clashes or someone chasing attention. This is about basketball gravity. The kind that does not ask for approval. The kind that bends systems and forces recalculations without a single demand being spoken. When one player's presence alone reshapes how defenses react, how teammates adjust, and how coaches make calls, things get complicated, fast, especially inside a gym full of stars who have never had to orbit anyone else before. For weeks now, fans have been locked in debates over Caitlin Clark's impact. Some say it's being hyped too much. Others say it's still being undersold. Box scores get pulled up. TV ratings get tossed around. Social media stays heated. But what reportedly went down inside this camp points to something deeper. Because the real issue was never about stats in the first place. It was about power, identity, and how uneasy things get when a system built on balance suddenly has to face an imbalance.
Kept it alive though. Bueckers, watch out, straight away. Yes, she still hasn't missed. 7 of 7 from the floor for Paige Bueckers.
That's created by pure gravitational excellence. And then there was the other presence in the gym, Paige Bueckers. Another generational name, another face of the sport, another player who has spent her entire basketball life being the system, not adjusting herself to fit into one. According to people familiar with the situation, this was not just a rotation check for her. It cut much deeper than that. It was a moment that demanded flexibility in a way she had never really been asked for before. That's the part most people overlook when they rush to choose sides. Nobody walked into that gym trying to spark chaos. Nobody had to. Sometimes, one quiet shift is enough to drag long-buried questions straight into the open. Questions about who the offense runs through, who bends, who stays locked in place, and what happens when the smartest move for winning does not line up cleanly with what everyone expected coming in. By the end of the session, nothing had been made official. No starting group announced, no public statements released. On the surface, nothing happened. Behind closed doors, according to those in the building, everyone felt it. This was the moment Team USA realized the next era might not fall into place as smoothly as planned. It arrived without noise, but the silence said plenty. And once that kind of tension shows up, it doesn't just fade away. This camp was never just another invite-only run for elite players. It was a reset, a quiet launch into a new 4-year cycle. With the echoes of Paris still hanging in the air and the pressure of Los Angeles already creeping into every decision, the 2024 games were done. That chapter was closed, and whether anyone wanted to say it out loud or not, every single rep in this gym was now being measured through a 2028 lens. Who fits long-term? Who can scale when the lights get brighter? Who defines the next version of dominance? That is what separates this moment from a regular all-star run or an off-season workout. Team USA camps are not about finding the best 5 players in isolation. They are about building a machine that can survive 4 summers from now, under global scrutiny, with expectations pressing from every angle. This is where pecking orders quietly form, where trust is either reinforced or chipped away, where future roles begin taking shape long before fans ever see a box score. The challenge facing the staff is almost paradoxical. The talent pool has never been deeper. Guards who could be franchise cornerstones anywhere else are fighting for the same limited oxygen. Wings who dominate entire leagues are now being asked to defend, screen, and space. Bigs who thrive on touches are being told to control possessions without ever hearing their name called in a set. On paper, that looks like a luxury problem. In reality, it is a pressure cooker. What makes this cycle even more delicate is how much the women's game itself has shifted. The spotlight is hotter, fan bases are louder. The business side is no longer background noise. Players walk into this gym carrying years of development, but also brands, expectations, and entire communities projecting onto them. Pretending that weight does not matter is no longer realistic. Every coaching decision now ripples far beyond the hardwood. That is why this camp was not just about chemistry, it was about direction, about deciding whether the program continues leaning on balance and tradition, or adapts to a new reality where certain players naturally tilt the floor, the audience, and the entire conversation. Those choices do not come with clean answers, especially when everyone in the room has the resume to believe they should be central. All of this unfolded under the watchful eyes of veterans who have lived through these transitions before. Players who understand that the most uncomfortable camps are often the most important ones. Dominance does not survive on talent alone. It survives on hard conversations, awkward adjustments, and the willingness to redefine roles before the world forces that reckoning on a bigger stage. That is the context people need before judging what came next. This was not a random clash or a freak spike in tension. It was the collision of timing, talent, and transition. A program standing at the edge of its next era, trying to decide how much change it was truly ready to accept. The answer, as it turned out, was not as simple as anyone hoped, because the moment the reset began, the hierarchy was already being tested.
Together on Team USA, I think she's just a competitor. She wants to win. She has just intangibles of the game. She knows how to play, great IQ. But I think the biggest thing about her, she competes, and she's just a winner. She wants to win at all costs. And so I know going into that, it'll be a great matchup. But I'm excited. It's great for the game, and to be at this level, on this high of stakes, to see where we were in AAU competing against each other, it's just really cool to see.
For Caitlin Clark, this camp was not just another opportunity. It was unfinished business. The kind that sits quietly in the background, driving every workout and every rep, even when no one is talking about it. Not long ago, she was on the outside looking in, watching Olympic roster announcements, knowing her name would not be called. No gold medal chase, no Paris moment, just a reminder that greatness does not always get fast-tracked, even when the spotlight says it should. What made that sting linger was not only the decision itself, but how she chose to respond to it. There were no public blow-ups, no passive-aggressive comments floating around, no sneaky shots taken in interviews. Instead, she did what elite competitors usually do when doors close quietly. She stored it away, let it tighten her focus, let it toughen her patience. When she arrived at this senior national team camp, she did not move like someone collecting on hype. She moved like someone who remembered exactly how it feels to hear those words, "Not yet." That perspective carries more weight than most people realize. Caitlin Clark has lived on both sides of the USA basketball pipeline. She has been selected, She has been cut. She has felt the pride and the letdown that comes with wearing those 3 letters, and the sting when they are taken away just as fast. So when she talks about this camp being the highest honor in American basketball, it does not come off as scripted. It sounds earned, like someone who knows these chances are never promised, no matter how loud the noise gets back home. And there is another piece that tends to get missed in all of this. For all the attention, the records, and the deep-range shots that turned regular nights into events, Clark has never carried herself like the system owes her anything. People mix up confidence and entitlement all the time. Inside this gym, by most accounts, she was not asking for special treatment. She was not pushing for extra touches. She was not demanding the offense bend around her. She showed up early. She stayed locked in. She played the same way she always has, reading the floor, making quick decisions, letting the game breathe. That is what makes her presence at this camp so charged. She is not chasing validation anymore. She is chasing alignment, a chance to finally sync her game with the highest level she has been measured against her entire career. When a player reaches that stage hungry but grounded, already familiar with rejection, they start to move differently, calmer, sharper, more dangerous. You can hear it in the way she talks about this moment, not as something she is owed, but as something she earned, piece by piece. This is not someone still trying to prove she belongs. That question has already been settled. This is someone testing whether the program is ready to truly meet her where she stands. And that quiet tension between past disappointment and present opportunity is exactly what made the next development land so hard. Because the moment she stepped onto the floor, it became obvious that whatever role this chapter was meant to hold, Caitlin Clark was not showing up to fade into the background. By day 3, the camp had found its rhythm. Players knew their spots. Coaches knew what they were tracking. The schedule showed nothing out of the ordinary. Morning film, controlled runs meant to keep legs fresh. Nothing that was supposed to matter beyond those walls. That is usually when the biggest shifts happen, when nobody is braced for them. According to people inside the gym, the change came quietly. No whistle, no stoppage, no explanation, just a small adjustment on the rotation sheet. When the next controlled run was posted, Caitlin Clark was listed with the first group. To anyone unfamiliar with national team camps, that detail might seem minor. Inside that environment, it never is. It signals intent. Being listed with the first group tells everyone where the offense is expected to naturally organize. It hints at where the reads will flow, who is trusted to make decisions when actions break down. The moment Clark stepped into that unit, the floor reportedly spoke for itself. Spacing opened up. Cuts got crisper. The ball moved quicker, not rushed, just reacting to where help defenders leaned. What stood out was not noise or bravado. What stood out most was how normal it all looked. Caitlin Clark did not walk in announcing herself. No chest pounding. No over-the-top reactions aftermakes. She simply played. She directed traffic. She took what the defense handed her, and then, almost casually, reminded everyone in the building why her shooting range warps the floor. On one trip down, the defense went under. She did not hesitate. The ball left her hands from deep and almost unreasonable distance, and dropped clean. No stare down, no celebration, just a turn and a sprint back on defense. Moments like that do not need commentary. Everyone in that gym knows exactly what they mean. In a Team USA setting, shots like that are not treated as highlights. They are treated as choices, as signals, as proof of what defenses are now forced to respect. And once that becomes real, the offense starts to bend around it, whether anyone plans for it or not. That was the part that reportedly caught people off guard. This was not a coach forcing a system. This was not a set designed to feature anyone. The flow shifted on its own. The ball kept finding Clark. Decisions started running through her, not because she asked for it, but because efficiency pulled it there. And in a gym where almost everyone is used to being the engine, that kind of gravity gets noticed. Immediately, as that run continued, attention drifted toward the sideline. Because someone else was not in that first group. In a normal gym, that might have been just another rotation. In this environment, it landed heavier. What had lived as theory for weeks suddenly became something you could feel. The hierarchy was no longer a debate. It was happening in real time. And once that realization settled in, the tension had nowhere to hide. Everyone had to sit with what that lineup quietly suggested about.
Yeah, it's fun. Anytime we can compete against each other. We're two competitors who just want to win, and who have grown up to be playing against each other, playing with each other. So it's great, and the environment's great here. I feel like every game is a sellout, and so they have a great home court advantage. So overall, yeah, great environment.
Where this camp could be heading. For Paige Bueckers, this was unfamiliar ground. She has been the centerpiece everywhere she has played since the moment she hit the college stage. Entire systems have bent around her skill set. Plays were built around her vision. Defenses tilted toward her gravity. Teammates moved with the understanding that when the moment mattered most, the ball would find her. That is not arrogance. It is what happens when you are that good, for that long. But inside this gym, for the first time, in a way that could not be brushed off, that assumption did not automatically hold. According to people who were there, Paige Bueckers was not part of the opening group. When Caitlin Clark stepped onto the floor, Paige stayed on the sideline, arms folded, eyes fixed, tracking every possession as the run played out. There was no visible frustration, no dramatic reactions, just focus, the kind that signals awareness rather than offense. When she checked in during a later segment, she did exactly what she has always done. She played hard, she moved with purpose, she made smart reads. There was nothing careless or detached about her minutes. On the surface, it all looked clean and professional. For anyone who knows her game, though, something felt different. The offense was not flowing through her instincts. She was not the first option. In broken plays, the momentum did not automatically tilt her way. That shift might look small on paper, but in a room like this, it carries real weight. What makes this moment matter is not that Paige struggled. By all accounts, she did not. It is that she was being asked without anyone needing to say it to exist in a context she had rarely faced. Not as the unquestioned engine, not as the default closer, but as one elite piece among many, operating inside a structure that was beginning to lean in another direction. After her run ended, according to observers, she did not linger. No extra shots, no half-court flair. She walked straight to the bench and sat, calm and composed. That kind of stillness speaks volumes at this level. It is not disengagement. It is processing. A competitor recalibrating in real time, trying to understand what this new reality might require of her. This is where the conversation usually gets flattened online and turned into lazy takes about ego or entitlement. And that completely misses the point. Paige Bueckers did not become who she is by blending quietly into the background. She became her by being central, by carrying responsibility, by responding when everything flowed through her. So when people close to the camp say, "This moment landed differently," it tracks. This was never about touches or minutes in one controlled run. It was about identity. For the first time in a long while, Paige was being presented with a new question. Not spoken out loud, not explained directly, but communicated through rotations, rhythms, and which player the ball trusted first. Those kinds of questions do not come with instant answers. They sit heavy. They force a player to reassess how they fit inside a system that suddenly has another source of gravity pulling attention elsewhere. As that reality settled in, the coaching staff reportedly began to realize this situation was no longer just about lineup experimentation. It was about what happens when two careers, built on being the center, collide inside a space where both cannot operate the same way. Not long after that stretch of play, the session did not roll forward like it normally would. According to multiple accounts from people familiar with the gym, coaches began stepping off the floor, one by one. This was not a quick sidebar, not a routine check-in. Assistants, coordinators, and USA basketball officials were gathered together. Phones were reportedly turned off. Doors were closed. And just like that, the tone of the day shifted from evaluation to intervention. It is important to be clear. None of this has been officially confirmed. What is known comes from accounts shared by individuals connected to the camp, and those accounts all point back to the same core idea. This was never about whether someone was playing well. A meeting was not needed to figure that out. According to those reports, the real question was far more uncomfortable. What happens when a room starts reorganizing itself around one player without being directed to do so? For a national team staff, that is a nightmare scenario. On one hand, that is exactly what elite talent is supposed to create. It simplifies the game. It raises the ceiling. It makes everyone's job easier once the score starts to matter. On the other hand, when that shift happens too fast or too naturally, it can destabilize something that has taken years to protect. Trust, buy-in, the belief that everyone in the room has a real purpose, not just a symbolic role. Sources suggest the discussion centered on balance, not balance measured in minutes or touches, but emotional equilibrium. How do you maximize what is clearly working on the floor without quietly pushing other players to the margins? Players who arrived at camp expecting to matter in meaningful ways. Those are not problems solved by tweaking a rotation. They demand philosophy. And philosophy debates do not happen casually during water breaks. What makes this meeting stand out is what it reportedly was not. It was not accusatory. No one was singled out. There were no dramatic confrontations. By most descriptions, it was tense, but controlled. The kind of conversation experienced staffs have when they realize they have reached a true inflection point. When the plan they arrived with no longer lines up cleanly with the reality forming in front of them. While that meeting unfolded, the court sat quiet. Players waited. Some stretched. Some stared off into space. Others talked softly among themselves. Everyone understood that whatever was being decided behind those doors would ripple through the rest of the camp. Once a staff pauses, practice to recalibrate, it is a sign that something has already shifted. Reading between the lines of what has been reported, this was never about ego in the cartoonish sense. No one was demanding touches. No one was throwing fits. This was about unintended consequences, about what happens when excellence is so overwhelming that it forces decisions before a program feels ready to make them. Those moments usually arrive early, often before systems feel equipped to absorb them. When the doors eventually opened and practice resumed, nothing was addressed publicly. No explanations were offered. Still, everyone in the gym could feel the weight of what had just occurred, because now, the question was no longer
whether we were on the U16 team together, U19 team together, whether it was me watching her in AAU. She's always just been smooth. She takes what the game gives her. Her midi has always been as nice as it's been this year. She's just she just plays way older than she is. She's confident, she's smooth, she just does everything at a high level, can score from all three levels. And that's how she's always played. And that's obviously translated really well. So
longer theoretical. It was real. The staff had watched the room tilt. And once that kind of shift is acknowledged, the job stops being just about coaching basketball. It becomes about managing identities. And that is the hardest assignment there is in a room full of stars. This is where the conversation moves away from personalities and toward physics. What was happening on the floor, according to people who studied it closely, was not about favoritism or forcing touches. It was about basketball gravity, the kind that does not announce itself and does not wait for approval. When Caitlin Clark has the ball, defenders react differently. That is not opinion. It is instinct. Help defenders shade over earlier than they should. Bigs hesitate between stepping up and staying home. Wings cheat toward her side of the floor even when she is well beyond the arc. Those half steps matter. Once they happen, the offense does not need a set call. It just needs players to read the openings that appear. Reports from inside the camp describe that exact effect. Clark secures a defensive rebound and immediately pushes the tempo. There is no signal, no glance toward the sideline. The defense reacts before anything is even called, scrambling to locate Caitlin Clark first, instead of the rim. That instant panic opens a seam. A lane runner slips through untouched. A shooter drifts to the wing with no closeout. The basket comes easy. When you watch it back later, there is no single mistake to point at. Her pace created the opening before anyone could slow it down. Freeze that same possession, and the edge disappears. That is what coaches recognize immediately. Tempo is not just speed, it is pressure. Clark applies it the moment she gets the ball. Walk it up, and defenses can load up. Push it, and decisions have to be made right now. Against elite athletes, That split second is the whole game. When players feel that advantage over and over, they start deferring without being told. The ball keeps finding the same hands because the results reward it. That is where the staff's dilemma deepens. This is not a player waving teammates away or hijacking possessions. This is efficiency doing the talking. The reads are sharp. The passes come early. Shots rise in rhythm. When basketball starts behaving like that, it trains everyone on the floor to lean into it. Teammates cut harder because they trust the pass will hit them in stride. Shooters stay spaced because they know the look is coming. Bigs set firmer screens because they understand the chain reaction that follows. Now, drop that dynamic into a room full of players who have spent their entire careers being the gravitational center themselves. That is where tension is born, not from jealousy, from displacement, from feeling the floor respond to someone else in ways you are used to triggering yourself. Even the most selfless competitors have to process that kind of adjustment internally. What makes this situation so complicated is that there is nothing obvious to fix. You cannot coach a player to be less effective. You cannot ask teammates to ignore clear advantages. You can try to slow the pace. You can try to equalize touches or force balance. Every coach in that room knows those moves come with a cost. The game always reveals the truth eventually, and gravity always wins. That is why this moment stretches far beyond one practice. Once a system starts bending, keeping it rigid becomes an intentional choice, and choices like that ripple outward. They affect lineups, buy-in, who feels fully recognized inside the structure. This was not a player demanding space. This was space being created, again and again, by how the game reacted to her presence. That is the uncomfortable reality Team USA now has to sit with. When gravity starts reorganizing everything on its own, the hardest part is not seeing it. It is deciding how much you are willing to let it reshape the room, and who is expected to adjust when it does. It did not take long for whispers from inside the gym to slip outside. They always do. Once even the hint of a closed-door meeting hit the internet, the conversation blew up. Not with nuance, not with patience. With sides, clips were reposted. Old matchups were dragged back into timelines. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Almost instantly, each side convinced itself it was defending truth instead of preference. Based on online chatter, supporters of Paige Bueckers framed the moment as disrespect. In their view, it was proof that a proven star was being quietly pushed aside. Caitlin Clark supporters responded just as fast, arguing that impact is earned in real time, and that the floor never lies. Within hours, the conversation drifted well beyond basketball decisions and into heavier territory: popularity, attention, who actually moves the needle, who audiences truly show up for. That was the moment the tone shifted. This stopped being about practice rotations and turned into a referendum on influence. Fans began throwing around claims about ratings, attendance, and jersey sales. Some of it was inflated. Some of it was unverified. Most of it was driven by emotion. Still, even in that mess, an uncomfortable truth surfaced. The sport can no longer pretend it exists in a vacuum. Visibility matters. Audience matters. Acting like those forces do not exist does not make them disappear. This is the part organizations rarely say out loud. When a player pulls casual viewers into arenas and boosts television numbers, that impact follows them into every space they step into. Not as a demand, as a reality. Decision makers feel it. Broadcasters feel it. Sponsors feel it. And yes, national programs feel it too. That does not mean basketball standards vanish. It means they are no longer the only variable being weighed. That collision feels especially sharp right now, because the WNBA is growing at a pace it has never experienced before. Media deals are expanding. Viewership is multiplying. Players are no longer just athletes. They are entry points. And when someone becomes an entry point for a new audience, the ripple effects do not politely stop at league boundaries. They spill straight into Team USA's gym, whether anyone invites them or not. From the outside, it is easy to dismiss all of this as noise. From the outside, it all looks like fans arguing and timelines burning themselves out. Inside the building, the implications are very real. Coaches do not set lineups based on likes or reposts, but they are fully aware of the ecosystem they are operating in. They know which players the public is tracking. They understand what happens when a centerpiece sits. They feel the pressure when excellence and exposure start overlapping. The tension shows up when that reality collides with players who have been doing elite work long before the spotlight arrived. Veteran stars, competitors who carried the game quietly while it was still fighting for visibility. For them, the surge of attention around one figure can feel less like opportunity and more like displacement, not because confidence is lacking, but because the ground underneath them is clearly shifting. That is why the online firestorm is not just background noise. It mirrors a much larger transition. The women's game is moving through a phase where basketball value and brand gravity can no longer be separated. Impact is now measured in more than points or efficiency. Being central no longer only means controlling the offense. It means pulling the world's attention with you. By the time the debates cooled, one thing had become clear. This was no longer about whether anyone belonged in camp. That part was settled. The real question now is how an institution built on balance adapts when one presence pulls harder than the rest, and whether everyone involved, players, coaches, and fans included, is ready to accept that the game they care about is entering a very different era than the one that came before. What happens next will not arrive through press releases or leaked quotes, and it is important to be clear about that. Everything from here forward lives in the space of possibility, not certainty. There has been plenty of online buzz, and reports suggest multiple paths are being quietly discussed, but nothing has been finalized. What is clear is that this camp forced conversations that cannot be undone, even if they happened on the calmest, most methodical end of the spectrum. The staff could take the route elite programs have relied on for decades. Slow it down. Sit with the discomfort. Talk it through. That might look like staggered rotations with clearly defined responsibilities. One player initiates when another sits. A different player becomes the focal point against specific lineups. In that version of the future, minutes may fluctuate, but purpose stays intact. Everyone knows when they matter and how they matter, even if that role does not mirror what they are used to back home. Another option is a full reframing of expectations. Reports suggest hybrid roles have already entered the conversation. Lineups where multiple creators share the floor, but with defined lanes instead of shared chaos. One becomes the tempo setter, another becomes the closer. That approach demands trust on all sides, along with a willingness to loosen habits that have been rewarded for years. It is possible, but it is demanding. Not every player is wired to thrive in that kind of controlled ambiguity. Then, there is the outcome nobody openly roots for, but everyone quietly knows exists. Sometimes, the fit is just not right in that moment. That does not mean failure. It does not mean someone lost. It means timing and priorities did not line up. A player could decide to step away from camp to focus on the grind waiting back in the league. Or the staff could determine that protecting chemistry requires a different mix altogether. Those decisions are rarely dramatic inside the room, but they echo loudly once they leave it. From the player's perspective, the math becomes personal. Is wearing USA worth sacrificing autonomy? Is chasing gold worth fewer on-ball reps? Is adapting to a role that does not reflect your resume a short-term challenge or a long-term compromise? For some players, that answer comes easy. For others, especially with bodies, careers, and contracts in the picture, it is a much heavier calculation. And this is the part that keeps getting lost in all the speculation. According to everything that has been shared, none of this is about bad behavior. No lines were crossed. No demands were made. The tension exists because elite levels are colliding, not because professionalism slipped. That distinction matters. It separates dysfunction from growing pains. And no matter which direction this goes, one thing already feels locked in. This conversation does not end when camp wraps up. It will resurface in future invites, in rotations, in high-stakes games where decisions have to be made fast and in full view. The groundwork is being laid now, in quiet rooms and long talks, for how this era of Team USA basketball defines itself. That is why this moment carries weight beyond one practice. The next move is not about picking sides. It is about choosing direction. whether the program leans fully into its most disruptive strengths, or tries to balance them even if that balance lowers the ceiling. That choice will shape more than a roster. It will signal how willing the system is to evolve as the game around it accelerates. When that day finally ended, there was no announcement waiting outside the gym, no depth chart posted, no quotes hinting at a new order. Officially, nothing had changed. Unofficially, everyone who walked out of that building felt it. Something had shifted. And once you feel that kind of movement, it is impossible to pretend the floor is still. That is what makes this moment important. Not because it guarantees conflict, not because it promises drama, but because it exposed a truth that had been building quietly underneath everything. This next era of women's basketball is not going to arrive gently. It is going to press. It is going to compress timelines. It is going to force decisions faster than systems are used to making them. What happened at this camp was not about one player being crowned or another being pushed aside. It was about recognition. Recognition that certain styles of play do not just fit into systems, they reshape them. And when that happens, the hardest adjustment is not tactical. It is personnel, asking elite competitors to redefine how they matter without erasing who they have been. That is uncomfortable for everyone involved. Coaches have to weigh harmony against ceiling. Players have to decide where flexibility ends and self-respect begins. Programs have to confront whether tradition still serves a game that is evolving in real time. None of those questions come with clean answers. Pretending they do only delays the reckoning. This story resonates because it is not rare. It is familiar. Every sport reaches this point, a moment when talent arrives so complete, so influential, that the old rhythm can no longer hold. The organizations that survive are not the ones that fight the change. They are the ones willing to sit in the discomfort long enough to understand it. That is where Team USA finds itself now, standing at the edge of something new. The hierarchy has not been rewritten yet, but the ink is hovering. Players feel it, coaches feel it, fans feel it. The shift did not announce itself with noise, and it did not need to. Once the game shows you what it wants to become, the only real choice is whether you are willing to let it. Because whatever comes next, whether it is smooth adaptation or real growing pains, one thing is clear. The questions raised in that gym are not going away. They will show up again under brighter lights, louder crowds, and higher stakes. And when they do, everyone involved will remember the moment they realized the ground had already started to move. This is how eras change. Not with press releases, not with announcements, but with moments that make people uncomfortable before they make sense. What unfolded inside that gym was not chaos. It was clarity, arriving earlier than expected. Team USA did not lose control of the room. The room revealed something the system now has to reckon with. That difference matters, because the hardest transitions are not about talent gaps. They are about timing, about realizing the future is already present, and deciding how much of it you are willing to embrace. Nothing has been decided yet. No roles have been finalized. No hierarchy has been stamped in ink. But the silence that followed this camp said more than any quote ever could. Once players feel the floor shift beneath them, the illusion of stability is gone. You can adjust to it or resist it, but you cannot undo it. That is why this story does not end here. It carries forward into the next camp, the next roster decision, the next high-pressure possession when instincts override plans. What happens next will shape not just a lineup, but the identity of the program itself. If you want to understand where the women's game is actually headed, this is the layer that matters. Not the box scores, not the clips, the power dynamics, the quiet recalibrations, the moments before the headlines catch up. This is exactly the kind of story Courtside Leaks exist to track. The real conversations, the real shifts, the stuff happening before the public is told how to feel about it. Stay locked in. This era is just getting started. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.